How is there a question about women's access to the diaconate when His Holiness slammed the door on it? No matter how many times the Pope says no to female deacons, it's still on the agenda to be discussed. At the end of the day, what are these ladies really wanting? They want something that is contrary to the will of God. God could have done anything He wanted, but for whatever reason, God decided that only men can be priests and only women can be mothers. There is still no room for a positive decision by the magisterium. The Pope said no. The Holy Father himself, it says, recently confirmed this consideration publicly. There you go. So whatever they get, it'll look like, feel like, it'll have the smell of an ordination, but it won't really be an ordination. You give them an inch, they take a mile.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
You might remember the 60 Minutes interview that Pope Francis did a couple of months back. We covered it when it was out. But here's the short clip when asked about female deacons. Have a listen.
For a little girl growing up Catholic today, will she ever have the opportunity to be a deacon and participate as a clergy member in the church?
No. It's settled. What are we even talking about anymore? His Holiness, the Supreme Pontiff, the guy who breathes words on airplanes and it must be fiat after that, has said no. So why are we still discussing it then at the Synod on Synodality at the Vatican right now? In fact, yesterday, it was a big part of the conversation that they were having. I have a document here from Group 5 and summarizing their conversation yesterday, which talks about the diaconate. Now, I want to preface before I read parts of that to you by going to this Associated Press article, which we'll link to in the show notes for you today. The Pope has said no to the female diaconate. He's also commissioned 2 study groups to investigate the issue, and it continues to be a debatable point and one that goes on in conversation. But there was some what the Pope called agitators outside the Vatican demonstrating against this, and I want to read this quote to you to sort of let this, ruminate on this. Just take this in for a second. This is from the article. His arguments have outraged proponents of women's ordination who have organized a series of events outside the Synod this month in Rome to press their case. Quote, "It's so insulting to keep on saying that the only valid role that will get the approval of this Pope is to be nurturing, is to be mother, while you can be nurturing and mothering and be a priest," close quote, said Miriam Dunnigan, a trustee at Vinegard's Institute for Catholic Research. Well, actually, no, you can't be both female and priest because that's not how it works. It didn't work that way for the 72 disciples that our Lord appointed and sent before him in today's gospel in the Mass. If you go to Novus Ordo Mass, you'll read that today, which, by the way, can I just point out that if Father McKeevely and other, theologians, church fathers show the hierarchy as something I was trying to allude to, that there was a hierarchy between these 72 and the 12. They were subordinate to the 12 apostles, whose successor become bishops, and they elected presbyterate or priests to assist them, none of which were female. None. Were women used to help with baptisms? Well, sure, female baptisms, sure, yeah, they were helped, but they weren't deaconesses. And this has become an issue that goes on and on and on. At the end of the day, what are these ladies really wanting? They want something that is contrary to the will of God. God could have done anything he wanted. Literally, it's his universe. It's his world. It's his creation. It's not ours. It's his. He could have done anything he wanted. But for whatever reason, God decided that only men can be priests and only women can be mothers. Oh, yeah, let that sink in. I can never be a woman, and I can never be a mother. Should I shake my fist at God or the Pope for not allowing me to be? Therein lies the question. Let me go to this document from the second session of the 16th General Ordinary Assembly of the Synod of Bishops. First General Congregation, October the 2nd, 2024. This is some good time reading here. Get yourself a cup of coffee, sit on your porch, watch the sunrise over the mountain range in front of you as you enjoy God's creation, and you take it all in as they discuss specifically of sacramental power. Sacramental power. The relationship between sacramental power, especially that which derives from the capacity to administer the Eucharist, and the ecclesial ministers needed for the care and the growth of God's holy people with a view to mission. Let that sink in. It's just, the language always gets me every single time. It's like they're triggering me. It's like they know where my button is and they're dancing on it. Point number 2, in the context of this broader reflection on sacramental power, ecclesial ministries and the charismatic dimension of the church, it will become easier to give proper attention to the pressing issue of women's participation in the life and leadership of the church. This includes the question of women's access to the diaconate. How is there a question about women's access to the diaconate when His Holiness slammed the door on it? We live in a hyper-papalist environment. There are so many people who push back and say, Joe, you're too critical of Pope Francis. He's the Pope, you're not. He said it, and it must be true. It must have to be that way because he's the Pope and whatever he says is fiat. And yet, no matter how many times the Pope says no to female deacons, it's still on the agenda to be discussed. Can someone explain this schizophrenia to me? Because I don't understand it. It goes on, though, regarding the latter topic, we would like to share from the outset that based on the analysis conducted so far, which also takes into account the work done by the 2 commissions established by Pope Francis on the female diaconate, the most useful conclusions of which will be made known in the final version of the document, the most useful of which. Golly gee whiz, that means you're leaving something on the table. That means you're going to be leaving something out. That means there's going to be data you're not going to share with us. You're only going to share the parts that you like, as my guess. But it goes on. The dicastery judges that there is still no room for a positive decision by the magisterium regarding the access of women to the diaconate, understood as a decree of the sacrament of holy orders. Therein lies the key, in my opinion. 2 things. There is still no room for a positive decision by the magisterium. The Pope said no, but there is still no room, leaving room for a hopeful positive decision in the future. But here is this interesting phrase here, understood as a decree of the sacrament of holy orders. Could it be that there might be, well, listen, these are just labels anyway, right? They're just labels. They're just words. That's all they are. They're not ordained. We can still give them the title of female deacon or deaconesses, right? It's just a word. It's just a label. What difference does that make? Do you see how they're leaving the door open for all of this? The Holy Father himself, it says, recently confirmed this consideration publicly. There you go. So whatever they get, it'll look like, feel like, it'll have the smell of an ordination, but it won't really be an ordination. You give them an inch, they take a mile. Let that sink in. You give them an inch, they take a mile. I still don't understand. It seems schizophrenic to me. The Pope said no, and we're still pushing it. It's still a conversation. It's still a debate. It's still an ongoing conversation point at the Synod on Synodality. Of all the things in the world that we need to discuss and to figure out is how to re-evangelize the world. How about that one? How about to win back our lost loved ones, our adult children who've walked away from the faith, that we get so many prayer requests here at the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network? How about that? Where is that conversation? Instead, it's this stuff that's being conversated. It feels like a giant waste of donor dollars to bring all these people into the Vatican to have these conversations, and they continue to persist in this regard. My friends, this is why we discuss what we discuss on the show, because in Catholic radio world, you're very rarely going to find such frank conversation. But we feel that there should be no conversation that we can't have because we are adults and we are Catholics, let the chips fall where they may. And we see the entire universe through the lens of the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith, because that is by God's design. That is by God's design. And if that is something that you also agree and want more of, you want more clarity in this world, then we need your financial contribution to continue to do what we do. 877-711-8500 is that phone number. 877-711-8500. Did
you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.